You're tuned into That's Life, where we celebrate the beauty, the chaos, and the wonder of real life. Sometimes it makes you laugh, sometimes it makes you cry, but it always makes you feel. Settle in. We're just getting started. Eleanor rushed through the rooms, feverishly gathering everything she could lay her hands on. Her breath came in gasps, emotion overwhelming her. Just now, the head of the institution had called, bewildered by her sudden departure. Although she had been let go without delay, questions came from everywhere, but she couldn't and didn't want to explain anything to anyone right now. She had met her husband, Arthur, during her practical training at one of the medical institutions. Feelings have flared up rapidly, and they, without hesitation, decided to marry. After she transferred to work at another institution, they postponed having children. At first, she was settling into the new place, and then it seemed it just wasn't the right time, although she tried to hint to Arthur about her desire. Eleanor sank into bitter memories, and tears of hurt and burning anger welled up in her eyes. The cause of it all was Clara, whom Eleanor had considered her closest friend. The day before, a terrible truth had been revealed to her. Clara had never been a true friend to Eleanor. Eleanor took on extra shifts at the medical institution, staying there overnight. Just yesterday, her 24-hour shift had been scheduled, but it was suddenly canceled. With joy, she hurried home, wanting to give Arthur a pleasant surprise. But hardly had she quietly entered the apartment when she heard bright female laughter. "You surprise me every time. I really don't know what you'll prepare next," said Clara's familiar voice. And Arthur, her husband, replied to her, "You know, you always motivate me. I think about you every minute. I want you to be happy. I'm ready to do anything so you won't be disappointed in me, my dear. You are my world. I'm ready to do anything for your smile and kiss." Eleanor slowly retreated back to the very entrance door. What she had heard was more than enough to grasp the whole terrible picture. Sounds of kissing came from the room, and she didn't want to see what was happening behind closed doors. Eleanor quietly left the apartment, leaving the door unlocked. That night she spent at the medical institution, not closing her eyes for a minute. Now she had returned to take the most necessary things. She desperately wanted to simply disappear. And during the long hours of sleeplessness, she had figured out exactly where to go. From one of her relatives, she had inherited a small house in the countryside. Almost no one knew about its existence, as many years ago she had left there to live with her father in another settlement after her mother passed away. Only when the relative passed away did she come for the funeral and learn that the house had been willed to her. It was a perfectly habitable little house that had been empty ever since. Eleanor made a firm decision to go specifically there. All that remained was to quickly pack the most essential things and documents. There she was sure no one would look for her. The last thing she wanted was for Arthur or her former friend Clara to find out where she was. Let them rather think that she has simply disappeared or that something unexpected had happened to her. "My former soul is no more," Eleanor whispered quietly, feeling everything inside her empty out. it seemed that, along with this phrase, a part of herself was also leaving only pain and the determination to leave as soon as possible. She desperately wanted to erase everything that connected her to this place. Approximately an hour later, everything necessary was packed. She stopped in the middle of the room, slowly surveying the familiar surroundings. Inside, the feeling grew stronger that she would never return here again. Here she had known happiness. And here, too, the truth about the betrayal by the two people closest to her had been revealed. This place ceased to be her sanctuary. Now it seemed dirty and repulsive to her, defiled by lies. Suddenly, nausea overcame her, and she hurried to get out of the apartment. She just wanted to leave, to dissolve into the unknown. Every minute spent here was unbearable. 2 days later, Eleanor found herself in the countryside. Before boarding the transport, she got rid of her old SIM card and bought a new one. She absolutely did not want to be hounded by calls from Arthur, Clara, or anyone else. If necessary, she would contact the medical institution herself to inform them of her plans regarding work. However, throughout the journey, a thought lingered. Was it even worth continuing her medical practice? The betrayal by those close to her had knocked the ground out from under her feet, and she had no idea how to live on. One thing was clear. She needed to drastically change her life in order to somehow recover. At that moment, she was walking along the railway track with a suitcase in her hand. She had reached the countryside by bus, but there was still a long walk ahead to her relative's house. One of the local residents gave her a ride, but only to a certain turn. Now she had to get to the required place on her own. When Eleanor finally reached her destination, her heart immediately felt lighter. In front of her stood the very little house that now belonged to her. Here, in this refuge, she felt safe, confident that no one could hurt her anymore. With a creak, the old gate opened, and she stepped into the yard. For some time, she just stood, breathing in the air, and then slowly closed the gate behind her. It seemed that along with this sound, she left behind all her sorrows and anxieties, taking a step towards a new, completely unknown life. Approximately 2 weeks later, Eleanor began to recover little by little. During this time, she managed to get acquainted with the local residents. They all turned out to be remarkably kind and sympathetic people. They helped her settle in, even finding workers who quickly put the house in order. The furniture inside was in good condition, and the yard was also quickly cleaned up. She even started smiling, unable to react otherwise to the sincere kindness of people completely unknown to her. To them, she was a stranger. But in these 2 weeks, they had done far more for her than she could have imagined. Her wounded heart still ached, but under the influence of such warm treatment, the wounds were gradually beginning to heal. Soon, an event occurred that clearly showed her that hiding her profession would not be possible. She had considered abandoning it altogether, perhaps becoming a farm worker or doing something similar. What else one could do in this area, she didn't know yet, but she intended to find out. However, she was not given the opportunity to refuse her calling. In the morning, one of the neighbors, Martha, the one who helped more than others, ran over to her. The woman was very agitated, and started speaking quickly. "Good morning, dear. Please forgive me, but I won't be able to help you today. I urgently need to go to another settlement. My little one is quite ill. Her stomach has been hurting for a few days, and she got really bad last night. She's constantly throwing up, can't even drink. I'm very worried, and we don't have a doctor here. Since the last one left, they haven't sent anyone. I don't even know who to turn to. I'm terribly worried about her. She's lying there pale, breathing somehow heavily. Her eyes are frightened." Eleanor said excitedly, "It looks like she's dehydrated. We need to give her an IV drip urgently. She probably ate something stale. But the main thing now is to relieve the intoxication." Martha threw up her hands. "My dear, what are you saying? Where would we get an IV drip here in our area? And even if we found one, no one knows how to use it. Our people can't even give a regular injection. And you're talking about an IV drip? We'll take her to another settlement. They'll treat her there, my precious child." Eleanor immediately rushed into the house to get her medical bag. It contained everything necessary. She had brought it with her just in case, although she hadn't planned on using her professional skills here. Eleanor quickly set up the IV drip for Lily, and the little girl immediately became noticeably better. Lily was able to drink water. By evening, her condition had normalized, and the trip to another settlement was canceled. Martha was immensely grateful to her, ready to literally kiss her hands. The next day, all the residents already knew that Eleanor was a doctor. She hadn't managed to hide her profession. Eleanor realized that when Lily got better, she felt incredible joy. And at that moment, the realization came. Only medical work brought her such deep satisfaction, incomparable to anything else. A month later, Eleanor was already working at the local medical post, which had remained empty for a long time. None of the specialists were eager to settle in the countryside, considering it a waste of time. And this was exactly what she needed, to hide from her former life and at the same time be useful to the kind and sympathetic people around her. Several months later, Eleanor came to a call for Lily, one of the local girls, who had had a high fever for a long time. The door was opened by Thomas, a pleasant-looking man. "Hello. You don't know me yet, but I've already heard about you," he said. "Please help my daughter." Eleanor just glanced at Thomas, noting the beauty of his eyes to herself, but immediately tried to push away any extraneous thoughts. This was certainly not what she needed right now. Yes, she had been alone for too long, but not to the extent that a single glance at beautiful eyes could drive her crazy. "Take me to her. I'll examine the girl," Eleanor said. 10 minutes later, Eleanor was already writing prescriptions on a sheet of paper. "She has bad wheezing," she explained. "I'll write down the name of the medication for you now. You'll need to go to another settlement to get it and a couple of other medicines. And perhaps could you call your wife? I'll explain to her how to properly treat the little one. I have a few tips I can share. The girl will get better quickly." An awkward silence hung in the room, and Eleanor looked at Thomas with bewilderment. He was looking at her, frowning. A minute later, he said quietly, "I don't have a wife. I'm raising my daughter myself. My wife, during childbirth..." He fell silent, swallowing with difficulty. Eleanor immediately shifted her gaze to the blonde little girl lying in bed. Her big eyes looked so trustingly. Eleanor felt her heart clench. How unfair life can be. Eleanor had pleaded with her former husband Arthur for a child, but he had refused. Probably because he was already having an affair with Clara, and Eleanor had dreamed so much of a little one. And here before her lay Lily, a girl who had never known a mother's affection. Encountering such injustice was unbearably painful. Eleanor looked at Thomas again, and an unfamiliar feeling arose in her heart. Perhaps deep sympathy, perhaps anxiety, perhaps a keen understanding of his pain. And it also seemed to her that she was about to drown in his eyes, which were looking at her so intently. You know, I'll come every day then, Eleanor said quietly. I'll do all the necessary procedures myself. You just get the medications. And I'll make sure the little one gets better quickly. Yes, sweetie? Eleanor gently stroked Lily's head, and she smiled back affectionately. Thomas also smiled, and Eleanor noticed how much the father and daughter resembled each other. I don't even know how to thank you, he said. Perhaps I could come and pick you up every evening so you don't have to walk to our place, Thomas suggested. Eleanor wanted to refuse such a kind offer, but immediately changed her mind. She hadn't interacted with men for so long, and this one turned out to be so pleasant, polite, and his daughter was simply charming. What bad could happen if he started picking her up? Eleanor could ask him about Lily's condition. She simply wanted to talk to someone other than patients and neighbors. Okay, then, I'll tell you the address where I know where you live, Thomas interrupted her and immediately fell silent. Eleanor looked at Thomas and caught something in his eyes that made her feel shy. Yes, he was handsome, but there had already been one like that in her life, one who had mercilessly trampled her heart. Eleanor already regretted agreeing to his offer to pick her up, but there was no turning back. After all, she herself had given her consent. Time passed. Eleanor was sitting on a bench near the house, enjoying fragrant tea. Strong male arms wrapped around her from behind, followed by a gentle kiss on her cheek. Eleanor closed her eyes and smiled. My love, is it really your day off today? You are mine and only mine, Thomas whispered in her ear. Before Eleanor could answer, Lily jumped off the porch with a joyful squeal. Thomas sighed with a smile. More accurately, not mine, but ours. Eleanor smiled, recalling the events of the past year. It had been the most wonderful time, for it was then that she met true love. He had managed to melt her frozen heart, and it turned out he had noticed her much earlier than she had him, and had fallen in love at first sight. His daughter's illness became what brought them together. But it was also a difficult time, because she had to face her past head on. For his sake and his daughter's, Eleanor decided to finally sever her old ties and went back to where she had left Arthur, her former husband, and Clara. As it turned out, they hadn't particularly looked for her. They were already living together, and the processing of all the necessary papers became merely a formality that had to be observed. Everything went quite quickly. While Eleanor was dealing with the paperwork, Clara tried to speak to her, but Eleanor didn't say a single word to her. Arthur, her former husband, didn't even try to justify himself, merely remarking that life is sometimes completely unpredictable. That day, Eleanor saw them for the last time. Now nothing tied her to her former life. She could completely devote herself to the man she loved, whom, strangely enough, she had met thanks to her relative's old little house. Eleanor sighed, letting go of the last remnants of unpleasant memories. She gently stroked his hand. "We have so much time ahead of us that I'll probably manage to bore you," Eleanor said with a smile. "You are my life. I love you. And you will never bore me," Thomas replied, holding her tightly.